The night was cool, the kind of cool that wraps around you like a heavy coat, settling into your bones. The streets of downtown were quiet, a stark contrast to the usual cacophony of honking cabs, chattering pedestrians, and the hum of neon signs that defined the city's pulse. It was pushing 10:30 p.m., and the only sound that broke the stillness was the occasional flicker of a street lamp overhead, casting jagged patches of light across the wet pavement. In the cramped alley behind Haven's Kitchen, a narrow brick building squeezed between a boutique and a vape shop, Marcus Rivera stood inspecting a stack of crates. The faint scent of garlic from the kitchen exhaust mingled with the damp, gritty smell of asphalt, grounding him in the moment. At 45, Marcus was a man who had clawed his way up from nothing. His hands, calloused from years of hard work, gripped a clipboard, its edges worn soft from years of use. He jotted notes with a stubby pencil, a nightly ritual to keep everything tight for the next day's chaos. For Marcus, this wasn't just some chore. It was his lifeline, a quiet moment to connect with the dream he'd fought tooth and nail to build. 15 years ago, he'd started with a rusted-out food truck, a loan from a skeptical bank, and a handful of recipes scribbled on yellowed index cards, his grandmother's secrets handed down over Sunday dinners in her tiny shotgun house. He'd hauled that truck to every street fair, late-night market, and shady parking lot he could find, flipping burgers and frying cornbread until his hands blistered and his shirt stuck to his back with sweat. Bit by bit, he'd saved enough to lease this spot and turn it into a culinary haven. Now, Haven's Kitchen was the kind of place where folks lined up around the block. Instagram foodies snapped pics of his Cajun steak, and critics tossed around words like genius and soulful in their reviews. To Marcus, it wasn't just a gig. It was his heart poured onto every plate, a legacy carved out of grit and grease. He tugged at the collar of his faded jacket, not some crisp chef's whites, just a practical gray thing he'd grabbed from a thrift store years ago, and locked the last crate with a soft click. The air carried a faint whiff of garlic from the kitchen exhaust, mingling with the damp, gritty smell of asphalt. It was a scent that grounded him, reminding him of where he'd come from. He tucked the clipboard under his arm, ready to head inside and call it a night, when the sharp clack of heels echoed off the alley walls. He turned, squinting into the dim light, and saw her, a woman in her mid-50s, blonde hair yanked back in a tight bun, dressed in a pristine white sweater and tan slacks that screamed HOA meeting chic. Her arms were crossed, her lips pressed into a thin, accusing line. Her name was Karen, a newcomer who'd moved into the upscale condos a few blocks over just 2 weeks ago. She stood there like she owned the whole damn street. "What are you doing back here?" she barked, her voice slicing through the stillness like a car alarm nobody asked for. Marcus blinked, caught off guard for a split second, his tired brain lagging after a 12-hour shift. "I'm closing up my storage. This is my restaurant," he said, keeping his tone level, his deep voice steady despite the flicker of irritation creeping up his spine. Karen took a step closer, her heels snapping against the pavement, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Your restaurant? Yeah, I don't buy that for a second. I know who owns this place, and it ain't you." He glanced up, his brow creasing just enough to show he'd registered her tone. After a marathon day chopping onions till his eyes burned, searing steaks till his forearms ached, and plating dishes till his legs begged for mercy, he was running on fumes. But he kept his cool. "I'm Marcus Rivera. I own this restaurant. Just checking my inventory before I head out," he said, his voice a low rumble, steady as the hum of the kitchen exhaust fan still whirring behind him. Karen folded her arms tighter, tilting her head like she was inspecting a used car with too many miles on it. "Oh, really? Now you own Haven's Kitchen? The place where people wait an hour just to snag a table?" She let out a short, dry huff, her tone dripping with sarcasm that stung like lemon juice in a cut. "I don't think so, buddy. I live around here. I know what's what in this neighborhood. The owner of Haven's Kitchen isn't someone like you." Marcus shrugged, turning back to his clipboard, scratching off another item. 5 pounds of potatoes, check. "I'm the owner." "Believe it or not, that's your call," he said, keeping his eyes on the list, his pencil moving with the same deliberate care he used to season a dish. But Karen wasn't about to let it slide. She marched closer, her heels clicking like gunfire on the pavement, her finger jabbing the air right at him. "No, no, no. Don't you talk to me like that. I know Haven's Kitchen is upscale, classy as hell. The owner's supposed to have some style, some real presence, not be out here in a ratty old jacket messing with boxes like this. He stopped writing, lifting his head to meet her stare, his dark eyes calm but unyielding. If you know the real owner, what's his name? Go ahead, tell me. Karen thrust her chin out, her voice hard as steel. I don't need to know his name. I can tell just by looking at you. The real owner doesn't do dirty work in some nasty alley like this. They're sitting in an office, dressed sharp, shaking hands with VIPs, not hanging around back here like you. Marcus exhaled through his nose, folding his arms across his chest, the clipboard pressing against his ribs. Like me? What's that mean? Karen waved her hand wildly, her voice climbing higher, bouncing off the walls. I mean, look at you. You don't look like you own a place like Haven's Kitchen. I've eaten there. I know what the customers expect when they walk in. They want someone who fits the vibe of a fancy-ass restaurant. Not you. He raised an eyebrow, his tone slow and deliberate, cutting through her noise like a knife through butter. Fit the vibe? Spell it out for me. Karen's face flushed pink, but she didn't flinch, her words tumbling out like she'd been rehearsing them. You know damn well what I'm saying. The owner's got to have a certain look, okay? I've lived in this country my whole life. I know who usually runs these high-end joints. You're out here checking veggies like some worker. You think I'm dumb enough to swallow that you're the real deal? Marcus stared at her, his voice still steady, a quiet anchor in her storm. This is my restaurant. I work here to keep it running smooth. You think owners don't get their hands dirty? Karen cut him off, her voice hitting a pitch that could have shattered glass. No, that's not how it works. Real owners hire people for this crap. You're just pretending, faking it. I see you out here all alone, this late, in this filthy little alley. You look more like a thief than a boss. I'm not letting you pull one over on me. He shook his head, a faint shadow of frustration crossing his face before it settled back into calm. I'm not pulling anything. I own this place. Got the papers to prove it. Karen swatted the air like she was shooing a fly, her voice sharp as a slap. Papers? Oh, I bet you cooked those up too. I know what this neighborhood needs, and it ain't you. I've got a duty to keep it safe from people like you. People like me? Marcus echoed, standing taller, his broad frame filling the space without effort. You keep saying that. What do you mean? Karen snorted, planting her hands on her hips, her stance wide like she was bracing for a fight. I mean, you don't belong here. You don't look like you own a fancy restaurant. I walk by this place every damn day. I know who should be in a spot like this and who shouldn't. Stop acting like I'm some fool who can't see through you. Marcus shrugged again, leaning back against a crate, his arms still crossed. I'm not acting. This is straight up the truth. But Karen wasn't hearing a word. She yanked her phone from her purse, holding it up like she was about to call down lightning. Fine. You want to play this game? I'm calling the cops right now. If you're really the owner, you won't mind explaining it to them, right? I'll stand right here and watch you get hauled off in cuffs. Marcus stayed put, his posture relaxed but solid, like a tree rooted deep. Go ahead. I'm not going anywhere. Karen punched the numbers into her phone, spinning away but throwing him a glare over her shoulder, her eyes glinting with mistrust. Hello, 911. I need to report a suspicious guy in the alley behind Haven's Kitchen. He says he's the owner, but I don't believe him for a hot second. He's rooting through boxes, looking real shady. Please, come quick. She barked into the receiver, her free hand flailing like she was directing a parade, her voice loud enough to rattle the windows above. Then she turned back, smirking like she'd already won. Cops are on their way. Better figure out your story, 'cause I know you're not the owner. I'm going to prove it. Mark my words. Marcus locked eyes with her, his voice as even as ever. I don't need a story. You'll see the truth soon enough. Karen stood there, hands on hips, her eyes blazing with a mix of triumph and fury. Oh, I'll see, all right. And when they drag you off, don't you dare say I didn't warn you. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, the red and blue lights flashing closer, turning the quiet alley into a tense, pulsing showdown. The two police cars screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth, their flashing lights slicing through the night, painting the brick walls in harsh streaks of red and blue that danced across the crates and wet pavement. Officer Reed stepped out first, a tall figure with a square jaw and a no-nonsense air, his hand resting lightly on his belt near his badge. Officer Lopez followed, younger, with a quick half-smile that faded as he took in the scene. Marcus standing by the crates, arms crossed, his broad frame steady, and Karen pointing at him like he'd just torched her house. Karen charged forward, her voice shrill enough to pierce the fading echo of the sirens, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Thank God you're here. I caught this guy messing around back here, caught him red-handed. He's got the nerve to say he's the owner. This guy? No freaking way he owns Haven's Kitchen. I know who this place belongs to, and it's not some lowlife like him." She thrust her chin high, hands planted on her hips, her tone thick with scorn, spitting venom with every syllable. "Check him out quick. I'd bet my house he's got a knife stuffed in that pocket, just waiting to cause trouble." Marcus straightened up, taking a deliberate step forward, his presence filling the alley like a quiet storm. His eyes were sharp, unwavering, but his voice stayed low and commanding, cutting through her noise with the weight of hard-earned truth. "I'm Marcus Rivera, the legal owner of Haven's Kitchen. Here's my business license, my driver's ID, and the lease agreement, all with my name on them, signed and dated." He reached into his jacket, pulling out his worn leather wallet, and handed over the stack of documents with a calm certainty that didn't need to shout. "If that's not enough, I can unlock the restaurant right now, show you the security footage from the last hour, the invoices from my suppliers, whatever you need to see. This is my place. I built it from nothing, starting with a food truck 15 years ago, scraping by till I could afford these walls. I don't need anybody's okay to stand on my own damn property." Officer Reed took the papers, his fingers flipping through them with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times, his eyes scanning the details under the glow of his flashlight. Officer Lopez glanced at Marcus, then lit up like a kid spotting his favorite superhero, his voice buzzing with excitement. "Hold up a sec, you're Marcus Rivera? The chef from Taste of the City? Man, I've been hooked on your Cajun steak since I caught that episode. Didn't you snag Chef of the Year around here too? My buddy was at that awards thing. He wouldn't shut up about your gumbo." Officer Reed nodded, handing the documents back with a rare flicker of a smile. "Yeah, that tracks. My wife booked a table here for our anniversary last year. Food was out of this world, best meal we've had in ages. You're the real deal, Rivera. No question about it." Karen flinched like she'd been slapped, her face turning a furious shade of red, but she roared over them, her voice cracking with rage as she drowned out their words. "No way in hell. You're all wrong. He's lying through his teeth. I live here. I know this neighborhood inside out. There's no chance he owns this place. He probably stole those papers off somebody or faked them in his basement." She stabbed a finger at Marcus, her voice hitting a pitch that echoed off the alley walls. "Who do you think you are, huh? Don't stand there acting all big and bad with me. I know who belongs here and who doesn't, and you sure as hell don't fit the bill." Marcus locked eyes with her, his voice dropping to a deep, resonant tone that carried an unshakable authority, each word landing like a stone. "I'm Marcus Rivera. I've owned this restaurant since it was a beat-up truck with a busted tire. I've fed thousands, regular folks scraping by, celebrities throwing cash, critics who write my name in their fancy columns. Ask anyone on this block, they'll tell you who I am. You don't believe me? That's your mess to sort out. But don't stand here spinning lies about me like you've got a clue." He turned to Officer Reed, giving a single firm nod. "If you need more, I can call my lawyer right now, have him pull every record from the city, the bank, the tax office, everything. I've said holds up, and I've got the proof to back it." Karen screeched, cutting him off, her voice a wild mix of fury and desperation. "Lawyer? Oh, don't you dare try to scare me with that crap. You're a fraud, a damn con artist, and I'll prove it. Officers, arrest him already. Don't let him weasel out of this." She flailed her arms like a windmill in a storm, her face twisted into a snarl, her blonde bun wobbling as she shouted like she was commanding a battlefield instead of two baffled cops. Officer Lopez frowned, stepping closer to Karen, his tone edged with impatience. "You just said he faked his papers and was packing a knife. Where's your proof for any of that?" Karen stammered, her voice faltering but still defiant, her hands clenching into fists. I don't need proof. Just look at him. He can't be the owner. You guys blind or stupid?" Marcus crossed his arms, his expression cool and unshaken, his deep voice slicing through her chaos. "You just accused me of a crime in front of two officers. I don't need to say another word. My papers do the talking." Officer Reed took a step toward Karen, his tall frame casting a shadow over her, his voice low and stern, cutting through the alley's tension like a blade. Marcus Rivera is the legal owner of Haven's Kitchen. His documents are legit. Name, dates, signatures, all of it checks out clean. You called us out here claiming he's suspicious, then doubled down, saying he forged papers and was carrying a weapon, all with nothing to back it up. You know that's public slander, right? That's not just a mistake. That's a line you crossed. Karen stumbled back a step, her bravado cracking like thin ice, but she still jutted her chin out, yelling to salvage her stance. I was just protecting the neighborhood, okay? He doesn't look like an owner. He's in a beat-up jacket, screwing around in this alley. I've got every right to call that out. Her voice trembled, but her eyes still burned with stubborn fury, refusing to bend even as the ground shifted beneath her. Marcus faced her, his tone steady and unshaken, carrying the quiet strength of a man who'd weathered worse storms. You've got the right to think what you want, but you don't get to make up lies about me. I'm here every day, busting my ass to keep this place alive. Cooking, cleaning, whatever it takes. You don't like how I look doing it? That's your baggage, not mine. By now, a small crowd had trickled in near the alley's edge, drawn by the flashing lights and Karen's shouting. Tom, a lanky 20-something in a hoodie, held up his phone, filming it all, his voice cutting through the murmurs. She just called Rivera a fraud right in front of the cops. This video is going to blow up, mark my words. Linda, an older woman with gray curls and a coffee mug in hand, stepped out from her stoop across the street, shaking her head as she called out, Karen, you're dead wrong here. Marcus is the best guy in this whole damn neighborhood. Officer Lopez turned to Karen, his voice sharpening, his patience wearing thin. You wasted our time with a false report, pulled us out here for nothing, then you went and threw around accusations that could land you in court for slander. Rivera's got every right to sue your ass off. You get how deep you're in this now. Karen's face drained of color, her hands trembling around her phone, her bravado crumbling into dust. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just making sure, that's all. She spun toward Marcus, snarling one last desperate jab. You think you've won this, huh? I'll tell the whole neighborhood about you. I won't let this slide, you hear me? Marcus shrugged, his voice as calm as a still lake, unshaken by her threats. Go ahead and tell them. The truth doesn't twist just 'cause you don't like the shape of it. He glanced at Officer Reed, his tone softening but firm. I'm not here to blow this up. I just want to go home. Been a long day. Officer Reed nodded but pinned Karen with a hard warning stare, his voice like gravel. You'd better quit while you're still standing, ma'am. This is your first strike. We'll log it and call it a night. But if Rivera presses charges, which he damn well could, that video's got you pinned. You're not walking away clean here. Tom laughed, waving his phone like a trophy, his voice ringing out. 50 live viewers already. Holy crap, Karen, you're a freaking star now. Karen froze, her face a mask of panic as the crowd's whispers swelled into a low roar, people pointing, muttering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. She turned away, her earlier swagger gone, replaced by a hunched shuffle and a flicker of dread she couldn't hide. Officer Reed faced Marcus, his tone softening, a trace of regret in his eyes. Sorry we had to drag you through this, Rivera. Shouldn't have gone down like this. Marcus gave a small nod, a faint smile tugging at his lips, weary but unshaken. It's all good. I've seen worse days. The morning after the alley confrontation, the sun rose over the city with a quiet determination, casting long shadows across the streets of downtown. The air was thick with the promise of a new day, but for Marcus Rivera, the weight of the previous night lingered like a bruise. He stood in the kitchen of Haven's Kitchen, the familiar hum of the stove and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables grounding him. The restaurant wouldn't open for another hour, but Marcus was already deep in his routine, prepping for the day ahead. The kitchen smelled of warm spices and melted butter, a sanctuary of stainless steel and simmering pots that felt like home. Marcus moved with the precision of a man who had spent years perfecting his craft, his hands steady as he seasoned a batch of Cajun steak. The sizzle of meat hitting the skillet filled the air, a comforting sound that drowned out the faint buzz of his thoughts. But the peace was short-lived. By mid-morning, the restaurant was buzzing with activity, not just from the usual lunch rush, but from a steady stream of curious onlookers, journalists, and social media influencers. Tom's video had gone viral overnight, racking up tens of thousands of views under the title "Karen Calls Cops on Famous Chef Closing His Own Restaurant." The comments section was a flood of outrage and support, with some folks fuming over the blatant prejudice and others cheering Marcus for keeping his cool under fire. The line outside Haven's kitchen snaked down the block, past the vape shop and the boutique, spilling onto the next street. Customers didn't just come for the food. They came to shake hands with the man who had turned a dumb run-in into a masterclass in dignity. They snapped selfies with Marcus by the counter, asking about the Cajun steak like it was a holy grail. The restaurant saw its busiest day in months, and Marcus found himself working double time to keep up with the demand. But amidst the chaos, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about him. It was about something bigger, a crack in the mirror of society, a spotlight on the kind of prejudice that hides in plain sight. He knew that Karen's actions weren't an isolated incident. They were part of a larger pattern, a thread that ran through too many lives. The waiter who gets followed around a store, the doctor who gets asked for ID in her own hospital, the kid who gets stopped just for walking home. Meanwhile, Karen's world was crumbling fast and hard. The video had turned her into a pariah, a laughingstock in the neighborhood she had tried so hard to control. Linda, the older woman with gray curls who had defended Marcus the night before, ran into Karen at the corner store a few days later. Karen tried to spin her tale over a pack of gum and a diet soda, her voice thin and brittle. "I was just looking out for the neighborhood, you know," she muttered, avoiding Linda's gaze. But Linda shut her down cold. "Nobody's buying that line, Karen. You've picked the wrong hill to die on, literally." Word spread like wildfire through the block. Neighbors stopped waving when Karen walked by, their smiles replaced with tight nods or flat-out stares. Kids snickered behind her back, whispering, "Allie Karen," as she hurried past, her head ducked low. A local blog picked up the story, running a piece titled "The Fall of Allie Karen, a lesson in minding your own damn business," complete with screenshots from Tom's video and quotes from regulars who had known Marcus for years. It got shared at every coffee shop, barber shop, and dive bar in the district, turning her name into a punchline nobody could escape. One humid evening, Tom caught Karen on camera again, this time squabbling with a cashier over an expired coupon at the deli down the street. The clip hit the neighborhood group chat within minutes, captioned "Karen at it again, guess she didn't learn squat." People laughed, but it was a sharp, bitter kind of laugh, the kind that comes when respect is long gone. Karen had rolled into the area thinking she'd be the queen bee, the self-appointed watchdog of the block. Now, she was its laughingstock, a ghost nobody took seriously anymore. At the mailboxes one morning, a guy from 3 doors down muttered to his wife, "She's the one who called the cops on Rivera. Can you believe that crap?" His wife shook her head, rolling her eyes. What a clown show. Poor thing's got no one left to listen to her. Meanwhile, a crew of Haven's kitchen regulars showed up one slow afternoon with a handmade sign. In big block letters scrawled in marker, it read, "Thanks, Rivera, the real boss." They grinned as Marcus hung it by the front door, right under the restaurant's glowing neon name, the bulbs buzzing faintly in the dusk. He stood there for a minute, hands in his pockets, watching the streetlights flicker on, the chatter of customers spilling out onto the sidewalk. The weight of that night in the alley lingered, but it was fading, pressed down by the steady rhythm of his life. Cooking, serving, building something real. He didn't need to settle scores or sling mud. Karen had buried herself without him lifting a finger. The truth had a way of cutting through the noise, louder than any shout she could muster. But this wasn't just Marcus's win, and it wasn't just Karen's flop. It was a story that rippled out, a cracked mirror held up to anyone who's ever felt those quick, judging eyes on them, sizing them up without a word. Karen thought she was guarding her turf, playing the hero in her own little drama. But all she did was show how small her lens really was, how fast she'd pegged a man's worth by his jacket, his skin, his place in her tidy picture of the world. She'd paid for it, not with handcuffs or a courtroom, but with something that cut deeper, a whole community turning its back, leaving her a punchline echoing through the streets she tried to claim. For every Karen out there, there's a Marcus quietly proving that value doesn't wear a uniform or a color, that a man's work can shout louder than a stranger's snap judgment. This wasn't some one-off dust-up in an alley. It was a wake-up call, a spotlight on the kind of prejudice that hides in plain sight, in sidelong glances and 911 calls over nothing but a hunch. It's a thread that runs through too many lives, and Karen's lesson wasn't just hers. It was ours, a nudge to check ourselves before we point fingers, to ask instead of assume. Marcus kept cooking, kept serving, kept standing tall, not because he had to prove anything to her, but because that's who he was. The sign stayed up, the line kept growing, and the neighborhood kept talking, not about Karen anymore, but about the guy who turned her nonsense into a rallying cry. Prejudice doesn't die easy, but it can't stand forever against people who refuse to let it define them. Next time you're quick to judge, take a beat. Look closer. Ask a question. Because the cost of getting it wrong isn't just a viral clip, it's a story that sticks, a ripple that spreads, a truth that outlasts every lie. The days following the viral video were a whirlwind for Marcus Rivera. Haven's kitchen was busier than ever, with lines stretching around the block and reservations booked solid for weeks. The support from the community was overwhelming, but Marcus remained grounded, his focus unwavering. He knew that the attention wouldn't last forever, and he was determined to use this moment to solidify his restaurant's reputation and give back to the neighborhood that had stood by him. One evening, as the dinner rush began to wind down, Marcus noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Officer Lopez, the younger cop who had recognized him during the alley confrontation. Lopez was sitting at the counter, savoring a plate of Cajun steak, his eyes lighting up with every bite. Marcus walked over, wiping his hands on a towel. "How's the steak?" Marcus asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Lopez looked up, grinning. "Man, this is unreal. I don't know how you do it, but this might be the best thing I've ever eaten." Marcus chuckled. "Glad you like it. On the house tonight. Consider it a thank you for having my back the other night." Lopez shook his head. "Nah, man, you don't have to do that. I was just doing my job. But seriously, what you did out there, keeping your cool like that, it was impressive. Not many people could handle that kind of situation with so much grace." Marcus shrugged, leaning against the counter. "I've been through worse. You learn to pick your battles." Lopez nodded, his expression turning serious. "You know, this whole thing, it's got people talking. Not just about you, but about the bigger picture. Prejudice, assumptions, all that stuff. It's a conversation that needs to happen." Marcus sighed, his gaze drifting to the bustling dining room. "Yeah, I know. But it's not just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been judged just because of how they look or where they come from. Karen's just one person, but there are a lot of people out there who think like her." Lopez leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe we could do something about it. Not just you and me, but the whole community. Use this moment to make a real change." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" Lopez grinned. "How about a neighborhood event? Something that brings people together, gets them talking. We could call it Unity Night, or something like that. You could cater it, of course, and we could invite local leaders, activists, anyone who's got something to say about this stuff. Turn this whole mess into something positive." Marcus considered the idea, a spark of excitement igniting in his chest. "Unity Night, huh? I like the sound of that. Let's make it happen." The planning for Unity Night moved quickly. Marcus reached out to local businesses, community leaders, and activists, all of whom were eager to participate. The event was set to take place in a nearby park, with food provided by Haven's Kitchen and speeches from various speakers who had experienced prejudice firsthand. The goal was simple: to start a conversation, to bring people together, and to show that the community was stronger than the divisions that tried to tear it apart. The night of the event, the park was alive with energy. Strings of lights hung from the trees, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Marcus stood behind a long table, serving up plates of his famous Cajun steak, gumbo, and cornbread. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and the clinking of utensils against plates. As the evening progressed, the speeches began. Marcus was the first to take the stage, his deep voice resonating through the crowd. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight," he began, his eyes scanning the sea of faces. "This isn't just about me, or about what happened in that alley. This is about all of us. It's about the way we see each other, the way we treat each other. We've all been judged at some point, maybe because of how we look, where we come from, or what we do. But tonight, we're here to say that those judgments don't define us. We're stronger than that. We're better than that." The crowd erupted into applause, and Marcus stepped back, letting the next speaker take the stage. One by one, People shared their stories, stories of discrimination, of resilience, of hope. The atmosphere was electric, a powerful reminder of the strength that comes from unity. As the night drew to a close, Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers, each one eager to shake his hand or offer their thanks. Among them was a familiar face, Karen. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then walked over to her. "Karen," he said, his tone neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." She looked down, her face flushed with embarrassment. I didn't come to cause trouble. I just wanted to see what this was all about." Marcus nodded, his gaze steady. "And what do you think?" Karen sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I think I was wrong. About a lot of things. I didn't realize how much damage I was doing, how many people I was hurting. I didn't know." Marcus studied her for a moment, then extended his hand. "It's not too late to make things right. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." Karen looked at his hand, then at his face, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. Slowly, she reached out and shook it. "Thank you, Marcus. I'll try." In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to heal. Karen kept a low profile, but she started volunteering at local community centers, trying to make amends for her past actions. The Unity Night event had sparked a wave of change, with new initiatives aimed at fostering understanding and inclusivity. Marcus, meanwhile, continued to thrive. Haven's Kitchen became more than just a restaurant. It became a symbol of resilience and community. Marcus used his platform to mentor young chefs from underserved neighborhoods, offering them internships and scholarships to culinary schools. He also started a nonprofit organization called Unity in the Kitchen, which aimed to provide meals and job training to those in need. One evening, as Marcus closed up the restaurant, he stood in the alley where it had all begun. The flickering streetlight cast long shadows across the pavement, but the tension that had once filled the air was gone. In its place was a sense of peace, a reminder of how far they had come. Marcus took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. He knew that the fight against prejudice was far from over, but he also knew that they had taken a step in the right direction. The truth had a way of cutting through the noise, louder than any shout, stronger than any lie. As he locked the door and walked away, Marcus couldn't help but smile. The journey had been long, and the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready. He had built something real, something that would outlast him. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Years later, Haven's Kitchen was still going strong, a beloved institution in the heart of the city. Marcus had retired from the day-to-day operations, passing the torch to a new generation of chefs who had been inspired by his story. The sign that read, "Thanks, Rivera, the real boss," still hung by the front door, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. Karen, too, had found redemption. She had become an advocate for social justice, using her own experiences to educate others about the dangers of prejudice and assumptions. She and Marcus had formed an unlikely friendship, united by their shared commitment to making the world a better place. The neighborhood had changed as well. The streets that had once been divided were now filled with a sense of unity and purpose. The lessons learned from that night in the alley had become a part of the community's DNA, a reminder that the truth always wins in the end. As Marcus sat on a bench in the park, watching the sun set over the city, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had built more than just a restaurant. He had built a legacy. And as long as there were people willing to stand up for what was right, that legacy would live on. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.